Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to my backyard. On our last video we talked about setting yourself up to get body weight on the paddle right away at the catch, and to keep your hips forward so that it would help get your center of mass in front of your body, so that your body weight would get on your blade right at the catch. And we talked about ankle flexion, like you were wearing ski boots, to help you get forward like that. So let's just get into that position again, and then we'll work forward from there and move on to the next drill. Okay, so just as a review, just so you can see my feet, I've got my normal leg bend. That gets me nice and low to the water, helps me get in a powerful position. I get a little bit of extra ankle flexion. I press my hips forward, squeeze my glutes, press my hips forward, and then I just do a comfortable rotation that gets my center of mass in front of my body, and I topple forward onto my paddle. The paddle takes my body weight. Okay. One of the things that came up in one of the videos that I looked at, that somebody sent, thank you for sending it, was your bottom shoulder. You need a strong bottom shoulder when you do this. You can't do everything right in terms of ankle flexion, hips forward, getting into an unstable position, falling forward, and then collapsing the paddle like that. Okay? You won't be able to do that in the water. Your blade will not support you to that degree. What you have to do is you have to search for the type of support from your blade that allows you to sort of put your body weight down on it and it to hold you. And remember, the blade wants to work against the water, so it wants to work against the water, which is here. Okay, so the water's here, the blade's working against it, and that's where you're going to get your support, by pushing down and back against the water. If it continues to go forward like that into the water, if your body weight continues to go forward as you catch the water, you're going to, for sure, you're going to topple into the water. Okay, so clean that up by getting a strong bottom shoulder. And in fact, you can think about catching the water with this point right here. Okay, right under your arm, that point right there. And when I'm catching well, I actually feel my arms extended like that. I actually feel this little muscle under my, at the top of my lat. I actually feel it. I feel it tense up. I feel it. You can maybe even see it right there in the shirt I'm wearing. I feel that tense up, and that's when I know I'm getting a good connection with all my body weight on it and in a strong position. Okay, so I would lean, do the same thing. You can't see my feet now, but I'm in my ski boots, hips are forward. I reach forward and I catch, and I'm in that strong position right away. Okay, that's going to guarantee a good catch with good body weight on the blade. So let's think about our arms for a second, and our upper body. We need to think of our arms as connectors, nothing more than connectors. We're not going to be pulling with our arms. Remember, we talked about using big muscles preferentially over small muscles. Our arms are small muscles relative to the muscles that cross our hips, which is the most heavily muscled joint in the body, or relative to the muscles in our legs. Okay, really small muscles in our arms. So we don't want to be pulling with our arms. They're like connectors. They're just tie rods that connect the water that we load on our paddle blade to the big muscles in the middle of our body that are going to be doing the pulling. They just connect the big muscles to the water loaded on the blade. The big muscles are what's doing the work. But to a degree, it's not just your arms that are the connectors, but it's also this part of your back. That's just a connector too. Even though the muscles in your upper body, your lats, your pecs, your muscles across your back, even though they're big muscles in comparison to your arms, they're still small compared to the muscles across your hips, the muscles in your legs. So think of them as connectors too. Don't try to over pull when you're paddling with your upper body. Don't try to get all upper body, because it'll take away from what you're able to feel with in terms of water on your blade with your lower body. And if you can't feel water on your blade with your lower body and your hips, then you're not going to be able to pull as well with them as you otherwise would be able to. Okay, so arms are connectors, and to a degree, your upper body, it just acts as a connector too. Another way to look at it is to think of, so we'll start at my paddling side hand, up my paddling arm, across my shoulders, down my top arm to where it sits on the paddle, and then down the paddle shaft back to my paddling side hand. So there's a circle, and that is a circle that needs to be fairly rigid. okay? We called it in sprint canoe a circle of power, or a circle of connectedness. You could call it a circle of tone, because all the muscles in that circle need to be toned. They're not necessarily tense. I don't like the word tension or tense or tightness, because we don't want to have tense or tight muscles when we're paddling. We want to be relaxed. But if you think of that circle as being a continuous circle and no breaks in it, like for example, if I pulled with my arm, I'd break the circle, right? Like all of a sudden that really, for lack of a better word, tight circle gets broken. And if you are weak with your paddling side shoulder when you catch, okay, so again, I'm in my position, my ski boots are on, my hips are forward, I do my rotation and I catch, but if I get weak in my shoulder, I'm breaking that circle of connectedness, okay? So it's really important to keep that circle as you're paddling, to keep that rigid, for lack of a better word, and that will transfer all of the work that you're doing with your big muscles to the water that you have on your paddle blade, okay? Very important. Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's think about where we are at the end of the drill we talked about last time. Okay, so again, last time's drill was we're in our position with our legs bent. We get into our ski boots, which gets a little bit of extra ankle flexion, our knees in front of our toes. We keep our hips pressed forward. We do some rotation, just like we would if we're in the boat, and then we catch the water. Okay, and we're in this really powerful position, and all of our weight's on our blade. If I take my hands, if I take the blade out of my hands, I'm going to topple onto the muddy ground here. Okay, so this is the position that we're in at the end of the drill, and this is the position that you're getting into as you're gathering water on the blade and loading your body weight onto the blade at the catch. Okay, and so the blade is going into the water, and it's taking your body weight, and you're in this position right here. It's really you've set yourself up for some good power. Okay, notice that the hips are forward, and if the hips are forward like they are right now, then they're available to use in the pull once we start to pull by going back, right? We can use our hips to generate torque going back. If we didn't do everything that the first drill encouraged us to do, which was getting our body mass in front of our center of mass in front of our body, and we sat in the chair instead, you recall that sitting in the chair is where you go to reach forward and you counterbalance your upper body moving forward and the weight of your head and your upper body by sticking your butt out behind you, right? Now my weight is balanced clearly over my feet, right? My paddle's not even on the ground, so I'm totally stable here. If you're in this position, not only does it prevent you from getting the body weight that we've been talking about on your paddle immediately at the catch, but it also, if you look at where my hips are right now, they're way behind me. They can't really go back much further. So how am I going to use them to generate power in the pull if I've caught the water, I've just finished gathering water in my blade, my hips are as far back as they're going to go. They're out of position now. They can't be used to generate power. So where's the power going to come from? Well, I guess it's going to come from a little bit of leaning forward at the waist, maybe a little bit more leg bend, although most people don't bend their legs enough. So it's probably going to come from a lot of like arms and rotation, okay? And that's really weak. So not only does getting into our ski boots, knees in front of our toes, hips pressed forward, not only does that allow us to get more body weight on the blade at the catch, but our hips are now forward and in position that we can use them during the pull. And this drill that I'm going to show you right now is simply getting the hips going before anything else in the pull, okay? So before you start to think about really using your legs, you've got to initiate the pull with your hips. So your hips are forward, and now they want to go back, okay? So some people, and this is a preference thing, some people, one end of the spectrum of using your hips is where you sort of thrust your hips back like that, where they both sides of your hips move back together, okay? The other end of the spectrum is where you, a little closer so you can see this, is where the paddling side of the hip goes back and the opposite side moves forward like this. So it's very rotational, like that, instead of like that, squatting back, okay? And then there's everything in between. And It's really a matter of preference, what you choose to do. I can tell you that not many people are strictly rotation. If you're strictly rotation, it sort of, watch my legs and watch my knees, it sort of precludes you from using your legs more, okay? Because my legs aren't bending at all extra through the stroke. If you tend to thrust your hips behind you, you tend to squat down more and you use your legs more. Most people are somewhere in between. I know I'm somewhere in between. I have a lot of rotation left over from my sprint canoe days where I can't get up and down like this with my legs because I'm in a high kneel position. But I've learned to get a lot of extra leg motion going too, so I'm a bit of a squat and a rotate. I'm more like that when I use my hips, okay? But you're going to be in the position you were at the end of our first drill. And the first thing you want to do, just in this position, is just think about engaging your hips. Okay, so I'm just watch my hips. You're looking for this part of my body right here, and just watch. I'm just gonna use my hips. And I don't know whether you can see this or not, but watch my paddle shaft. Watch my paddle shaft flex. I'm just trying to generate flex in my paddle shaft by using my hips, and I'm trying to connect what my hips are doing to make that paddle shaft bend. I'm trying to make that connection through my back and through my arms to the paddle. Okay, I'm generating pressure directed down the paddle shaft with my top hand, just enough to hold it into the grass. Okay, I'm not driving down like this with my top hand. That's not the way we paddle. We just have some pressure, just pressure that keeps the blade in the paddle grass here. There keeps the paddle in the grass here. Or if we're on the water, we keep it connected to the water, keep it supported in the water. So it's just pressure, okay? So downward pressure with my top hand, and then the pulling from my hips is coming underneath my top hand from my bottom hand, okay? So there's my bottom hand on the paddle, and I'm just going to use my hips, and I'm going to get some blade flex. Okay, so I'm starting to pull back with my hips, and you can see I'm getting a little rotation and I'm getting a little bit of backwards thrust with my hips. Okay, I'm just going to move a little closer to the camera so you can look at the paddle shaft, and you can use the vertical lines in the fence, the boards in the fence in the background as a reference to sort of see how my blade flexes. Get it so you can see my hips. Okay, so here I am, hips are forward, blades in the water or under the grass, and now I'm going to use my hips and watch the shaft flex as I use my hips. And that's all this drill is. Just trying to initiate the pull with your hips, as opposed to starting your pull and thinking about pulling the blade through the water with your arms. Okay, it's try to keep your rotation with your paddling side shoulder. Try to keep your paddling side shoulder in front of you. I like to think about having my shoulder underneath my chin. I'm looking down my arm, kind of like I would be almost like if I was an archer and I was drawing the bow back. Okay, so I'm in this position here, shoulder under my chin, and then that doesn't really change much when I engage my hips. I just kind of use my hips to get the blade, the shaft to flex. And if the shaft is flexing, I'm transmitting power onto the shaft and against the water that's gathered on the blade. And I'm doing it through my upper body here, okay? Through my upper body and down my arm to the paddle. And that's going to work against the water. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm actually saving my paddle angle. Like I haven't lost any paddle angle at all. So, you know, I can't lose really any paddle angle here against the ground because it prevents my blade from back. And also as I'm doing this, I'm not moving forward like I would be on my board. So doing this drill on land is really a good chance it gives us a good opportunity to feel what we should be doing with our paddle, right? But you can see that the first motion is coming from my hips going back and saving paddle angle while I'm doing it, okay? What would be next? Well, next, after my hips have started to come back, then I can start to use my legs and get a little bit lower in the stroke, okay? And you know, get into the middle of the stroke where your blade comes closer to your body and approaches vertical. So that's what we're really trying to do in this drill, is simply using our hips first to initiate our pull, and then in the next drill I'll show you, we'll follow with our legs, and saving blade angle while we do it. Like, we're trying not to lose blade angle as water's loading onto the blade and we're getting ready to pull. A lot of people are just losing blade angle while they're doing that. We're trying to save blade angle until we start to torque with our hips, okay? And you can see the other thing this drill does is it really emphasizes the nature of your upper body simply being a connector between the water loaded on the blade and those big muscles of your hip, okay? And later on when we start to use our legs, later on in the stroke when we start to use our legs, our upper body's a connector to our legs as well. It's going to be a lot different when you try this on the water compared to what it feels like on land, simply because on land I'm not moving. I can lean on this paddle all day and the land doesn't move. When you get on your board, as soon as you lean on your paddle with a little bit of body weight, the board starts to move. And so you lose some of that connection that I'm feeling here in the land, or you will be feeling in the land when you do this drill on land. The blade will never stay in one place like it's doing here and allow you so easily to find that blade flex, that shaft flex, because the board will start to move. So one thing that you can do to slow the board's movement down a bit and to make it feel more like it feels here on land is you can put a band or a brake, like a hydro brake, a water brake, or what we call it, a resistor, around your board, or you can drag your leash or put something on your leash even and drag it. Or I usually wrap a bungee around my board, and if I really want to feel big resistance, what I've done is I've threaded some tennis balls. I cut a hole in either side of the tennis ball and thread them through the bungee. I usually put 3 tennis balls on a bungee, so I've got varying degrees of resistance. I can go with 3 balls, 2 balls, 1 ball, or just the bungee. And I put that around my board and it slows my board down. If it's 3 balls, it slows it down a lot. And it kind of makes it feel more like it feels like here on land. It gives you a chance to sort of slow things down and feel the connection, feel what you're feeling here in the land drills without the board running away from you because it takes off, okay? So you could start, if you wanted to do a drill like this, to really, you know, go from what we've done here on the land to feeling it on the water. You could start with a bungee with 3 tennis balls. You could take one off, go to 2. You could take one off, go to 1. Just go with the bungee and then try to feel the same connection paddling normally. And that's going to help you feel what we're doing here on your board without any resistance if you go through that process. The one thing about using resistance on your board that I'd like to warn you about or caution you about is that more is not necessarily better, okay? More in terms of how often you're using it or how long you're using it for is not necessarily better. First of all, if you use it too much, you're going to risk injury. It really dramatically increases the load that you're feeling, that your muscles are feeling when you pull a stroke, right? The more resistance there is to forward movement through the water, the more, and you're trying to like throw yourself into working against that resistance, the more you're going to be putting load on your joints, especially I'm thinking elbows and shoulders. And so more is not necessarily better. Don't do it too much because you'll risk developing an overuse injury. So I would say do it for 20 minutes maybe once or twice a week, and that would be plenty. Don't do it more than that. The other reason that you don't want to use resistance, at least big resistance, too often, is that it's teaching you to paddle slow, okay? And you don't want to paddle slow. So this is no longer the drill. This is a digression, but it's a useful digression in this instance. When we paddle, it's all about kind of matching, matching the speed of our board. So we're paddling along and we're connecting and we feel really good, and we're kind of matching the speed of the board. In fact, if we want to accelerate, we want to be working with the water we have loaded against our on our paddle blade. We want to be working against that water slightly faster than the board is actually moving, and that will allow us to accelerate. If you try to work too fast against that, too much faster than the board's moving, work against the water too much faster than the board's moving, then unless you're incredibly strong, chances are your blade's going to start to slip. It takes a lot of strength to work faster against the water than the board's actually moving. So a little bit is enough to get you to accelerate a considerable amount. If we work against the water at the same speed as the board's moving, we simply maintain speed. And that's what you're doing in the middle of your race when you're maintaining speed. And then if you work slower against the water than the board's moving, you're actually going to end up going slower. So you don't want to do that. Now the problem is that if you use resistance too much, what it does is it's really hard to work against resistance as dynamically as you're able to do when there's no resistance on the board at all. Or imagine if you paddle on a really narrow board, like a 21-inch wide board, and then you go to a 30-inch board, you feel a whole lot more resistance, right? In order to keep up with how quickly that 21-inch wide board accelerates every stroke, you got to be able to work really quickly. You got to be able to engage against the connection that you have in your paddle really quickly and feel that connection. It's like doing weights in the gym where you're doing really explosive weights. If you don't, if you paddle slowly or slower too much, so like say for example, if you went from paddling on your 21-inch wide board and started paddling on a 30-inch wide board for a month, your ability to find connection and work against that connection at that same dynamic rate would diminish, because you're not keeping your nervous system sharp for that type of those types of muscle contractions, right? That you need to work that dynamically. And so it's the same thing as if you use resistance too much, you just can't work as quickly with your paddle against the water with the resistance on your board, especially if it's you've got the tennis balls on, as you can without any resistance on your board. And so you learn to start to pull at the speed your board is moving with the resistance. Okay, so instead of being that super dynamic that you need to be to keep up with the 21-inch wide board, you start being less dynamic. You're powerful, but you're less dynamic than you are you're less dynamic with the tennis balls on than you would be without them. And you're pulling at the speed of the board now. So you're powerful. You're against the load instead of being really dynamic and working against the water and keeping up to the fast board like you would be if you didn't have the resistance. I don't know if I explained that well. It's the first time I think I've tried to explain that talking. I do it in writing and it seems easier for me. If you got any questions about that, please ask. But that's the danger of using resistance too much. Injury, especially to your elbows, shoulders, and then also you're teaching yourself to work at the speed of a slower board if you use it too much. Now, if you use it a couple times a week for 20-30 minutes, what you're going to do is you're going to develop some specific strength, the ability to put a little bit more power into every stroke, and it's going to help you feel the water better, just like drills help you feel aspects of your technique better. Then you take the resistance off, all of a sudden your board's going to feel like it's taking off from underneath you, but you will quickly catch up to the faster pace of the board, and you'll be fine, and you'll actually be better for it because of what you've done with the effect that the resistors allowed you to feel. But if you use it too much, you get away from being able to keep up with that fast moving board, and you end up pulling more slowly, then the board's moving. And that's one of the problems that I've always encountered when I've moved from a wider board to a narrower board. So when I went from a 25 to a 23-inch wide board, 23-inch wide board should be faster. For the first, I don't know, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I felt like I was underachieving on the 23-inch wide board. I felt like I couldn't keep up with the board. I felt like my stroke wasn't as effective. And I felt it was hard to keep the board up on top of the water. It would accelerate and it would sink down. It would accelerate, it would sink down because there was less planing surface to keep it on top of the water. And then, over time, I learned to paddle at the speed of the board, to match the speed of the board, and even be a little bit ahead of the speed of the board so I could really get it to accelerate. And then I'm maximizing what the board is able to do. I went through the same process, but it was easier when I went from a 23 to a 21.5-inch wide board. And when I went from the 21.5-inch wide sprint to the 20.75, it was only a 3/4 of an inch difference. That's not much, but I still, there was a week or so where I could feel that difference, and I just needed my nervous system to adapt to allowing my muscles to contract in the paddling motion contractions just a little bit faster than it had before, so I could still feel the connection. When I'm talking about connection, what I'm talking about is you feeling the water loaded on your blade, and you're feeling the tug of the paddle in your fingers of your paddling side hand. You feeling that bent shaft feeling as you're paddling. You're feeling pressure directed down the paddle shaft through your top arm. Again, it's just pressure. You're not paddling like this. It's just pressure. And you're feeling the connection in your hips, right? You're feeling it through your upper body, your arms and your upper body, because they're the connectors, and you're feeling it in your hips and in your legs. And obviously, you if the board is taking off from underneath you, you're trying to catch up to the board, and you can't feel the connection as well. But when your nervous system gets in sync with the new board, it's used to working a little, making you work or allowing you to work a little bit faster, or coordinating your movements at a bit of a faster speed, then you're back in sync with the board, and you can feel your connection, and you can paddle effectively. Just to review then, this drill builds on the first drill. We'll just go through what we've learned about the stroke so far. The first drill was for the catch and getting body weight on the paddle at the front of the stroke, keeping our hips forward so that they would be available for us to use in the pull. So we're in our bent leg stance. We get ankle flexion that gets our hips over our knees a little bit more. Press our hips forward. We do our rotation. We fall on the paddle. It's nice strong bottom shoulder. Now our body weight's on the blade. And in this position then, what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do, pressure directed down the paddle shaft with the top arm to keep it connected in the water. And then we're just going to use our hips to make the blade flex, and if the blade's flexing, then we're working against the water that's gathered on the blade. Okay? So I'm losing track of the next time I'm up. You have to consult the Paddle Monster Facebook page and the Paddle Monster website, and there's a schedule of which coach is up next with their video. But in my next Facebook Live, we'll look at a drill that's for the pull and how to engage our legs after we've started the pull by using our hips. I'll share that with you as well. Okay, so please ask questions. If you want to send a video of yourself doing this or the last drill, I'm happy to look at them and give you some feedback. And any other questions you have, I can't answer them when I'm actually doing the video, because I find it really distracting to walk back and forth and look at the questions. But I do look at them after, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Okay, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's healthy, their families are healthy, everyone's staying safe, and still able to do some type of training. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.